Trust factor. Military formations have long sought to lessen the tension between the rigidity of their organizational structures and the need for quick, decisive, imaginative leadership plus flexibility of movement on the battlefield. General George Armstrong Custer's ego, for example, blinded him to the realities of the situation at the Battle of the Little Big Horn, and it cost many men their lives in consequence. The U.S. cavalry of the 19th century seems to have lacked the organizational checks and balances required to halt one man's dangerous ambitions. But too much centralized control, red tape and restraint can be just as risky as too little. During Operation Mercury, the German airborne invasion of Crete in May 1941, General Bernhard Freyberg, the island's commander, and his subordinates opted for an outdated static defense in the face of aggressive, highly motivated but lightly armed paratroops. It was largely thanks to Freyberg's autocratic style of leadership and obsolete military thinking which allowed the Germans to eventually wrestle control of the island away from its Commonwealth defenders, a numerically superior force, and impel a humiliating evacuation. Not only did the Germans employ every technological advantage available to them, but they also harnessed the esprit de corps, or fighting spirit of the Fallschirmjäger paratroops, a wholly new type of warrior. Unlike most of its adversaries at the time, the German military machine believed in swift campaigns of strike and maneuver. By forming all available units into Kampfgruppen, or battle groups, a local commander had the tools, knowledge and freedom of action to ruthlessly exploit the slightest weakness in the enemy line without hesitation. In contrast, Freyberg's unit commanders exercised almost no freedom of control over the battles they fought and lost. You must grasp the full purpose of every enterprise, so that if your leader be killed you can yourself fulfill it. 10 Commandments of the German Parachutist, The Fall of Crete by Alan Clark. Typically, the British Army of the Second World War still believed in training its soldiers to simply obey orders without asking too many questions. Officers rarely took NCOs into their confidence about operational matters, let alone the rank and file. Consequently, when a unit's officer was killed or badly wounded, there was no one ready to take command with enough operational knowledge to complete the mission. The Germans adopted a far more enlightened and pragmatic policy, whereby every man was expected to be able to step into the shoes of his direct superior. The German army's system encouraged and rewarded initiative, flexibility, and daring. The result was a crop of fine, resolute, gifted planners and aggressive leaders, such as Erwin Rommel, Walther Model, and Kurt Student. Only later, as the war progressed, did the British and other Allied armies start to gradually adopt similar methods. Victory or defeat in the corporate sphere may not cost lives, but can certainly cost livelihoods. Rigid organizational structures and strong corporate cultures can often do more to hobble talent than harness it. Instead of fast-moving, flexible organizations, always ready to ruthlessly exploit a competitive advantage, many companies are hindered by their own bureaucracy and an army of timid, indecisive middle managers. For fear of making the wrong decision and being held accountable, these people make no decisions. Instead, they choose to endlessly analyze or prevaricate. For far too long, UK businesses have failed to appreciate the importance of investing in professional management training, internal communications, and leadership skills. In many ways, the German military approach can be likened to Charles Handy's concept of a donut organization, as expressed in his book The Empty Raincoat. As a central organizing principle, Handy suggests a balance between core roles, responsibilities, or duties and a bounded space, where initiative, daring and imagination can be expressed, cultivated or tested. The major difference between a donut organization and a traditional hierarchy, whether commercial or military, is one of trust. The Allied commander of Crete saw no place for discretion or freedom of action among his line officers. Strict control of troop dispositions was supposed to ensure a predictable outcome. This proved counterintuitive, as it simply robbed line officers of their freedom of action, the ability to adapt to changing circumstances on the battlefield. The German system also sought to impose a regime of strict discipline and obedience within its ranks. The Germans instilled an extreme sense of duty and loyalty to the fatherland within its troops. However, this was tempered with trust in a shared vision, values and beliefs plus a man's personal qualities, such as integrity, intelligence and courage, as well as his professional talents. Men were recognized, rewarded and quickly promoted for their daring, inventiveness, or inspired leadership. It's hardly surprising to learn that many of Germany's senior commanders, during the latter stages of the war, had been relatively junior officers at its outbreak. Today we see many variations of Charles Handy's donut organization, as numerous enterprises finally come to realize that bureaucracy tends to be cumbersome, unresponsive, costly and uncompetitive. One example of just such a transformation is the HM Treasury's National Savings and Investments Agency, NSI. Until the late 1990s, NSI employed a staff of over 4,000 to develop, promote, sell and service its wide range of government-backed saving and investment products, such as ISAs and premium bonds. The new shape of work will center around small organizations, most of them in the service sector, with a small core of key people and a collection of stringers or portfolio workers in the space around the core. Charles Handy, the empty raincoat. Finding itself increasingly squeezed by new web-based entrants to an already overcrowded financial services market, NSI struck a deal with Siemens Business Services, SBS. Siemens assumed responsibility for the bulk of NSI sales and back-office operations, excluding Post Office Counters Limited. Over 3,500 NSI employees, mostly sales, customer service and accounts people, transferred to SBS, securing their jobs and long-term futures. The remaining NSI core people were then trusted to concentrate solely on the development, marketing, advertising and launch of new financial products to the marketplace, or enhance existing ones. SBS received a guaranteed 10-year contract to run the NSI call center plus its online and mail order businesses. Having dramatically increased its sales force almost overnight, Siemens could immediately compete for additional service sector contracts. SBS also furnished NSI with the advanced IT systems necessary for them to get closer to their customers, understand them better, explore new market opportunities, and compete more effectively. To deliver its products and services so they consistently surpass customer expectations, it's essential that a company's brands, people, suppliers and partners are carefully aligned and demonstrate a high level of interconnectedness. That same organizational structure must also be flexible enough to anticipate and adapt to changing customer needs, new opportunities, and competitive threats. An organization's people must be given trust, encouragement, focus and direction rather than rules, regulations, or limitations. Modern IT, IS and CRM systems can also provide the necessary tools for quick, confident decision-making and sharing of corporate knowledge. The process of gathering, assessing, sharing and, most importantly, using information cannot be underestimated. The fall of Crete clearly illustrates the point. History taught General Freyberg that only a naval blockade or amphibious assault could capture his island. That meant deploying many of his men to defend the various ports, harbors, or other small anchorages that punctuated the coastline. The Germans had other ideas. German strategy relied on surprise, speed and a radical new form of airborne warfare. Success or failure hinged on the paratroopers immediately seizing Crete's airfields rather than its harbors. To secure and hold the airfields, German paratroops had to be swiftly reinforced and replenished with food, ammunition, and medical supplies, while their wounded were evacuated. The landing strips would also